I believe in the children of our future. Alright, so even though this was very far away from me, it seems like the audio is great. Cool beans. So another thing that I need to see, my docs. This thing always has me going back to like looking at or logging into the chat rooms. Such a pain in the ass. You know what I'm saying? Hold on, let's see.
For, but don't know its whereabouts. You can see by what they doing, what they care about. We gon' air
These
it out.
ants are fucking coming out of nowhere, my guys. God damn. These ants are fucking my shit up, y'all. Wild work, crazy work, wicked work. We don't like it. We don't like it.
Presidents were reckless, but who won't check them? The people, a nation connected. Messages from Haven, the Haitians' reflections. What is the
Me don't like it, okay? Me don't like it. Me don't like it. Me don't like it. Oh, nice. That's cool. Cool beans. So like I can see all of this. I need to see my chat room though. That's important. I have a warning for my stream. I don't know what that's about. Okay. Well, you guys. Hey. Hi everyone. Happy Saturday and shit. It's only 2 people here. That's fine. Oh, okay. All that good shit. Well, that's okay. This will be all right. Let's boom, and then make this a. Oh, wow, wee wah. Wow, wee wah. You know, now I can see my chat. Let's just put that over there, right? You know, and then I can open this thing here. You know, it's very nice. Happy Saturday, everybody. Welcome. For those of you who don't know, I will be your pilot for today's book club. If you are on YouTube, you can see the book that we're going to be reading, which is Vulture Capitalism by Grace Blakeley. It's been very long. It's been a long try, but we're going to be wrapping up chapter 7 today. Let's make sure. Yep. Yep. Yeah, we got one more section of chapter 7, which is titled "The Human Right to Capital Flight." You know, so far what we've been diving into with this book has just been like how governments plan, and not just how governments plan, but the intricate relationship that government and corporations have in planning and designing society. Right? We tend to think that everything is separate. You know, you have private corporations and businesses over here, government over there, and the people over here. And, you know, it's the government that's meddling in business. But in reality, if we're looking at it objectively, we have all of these business interests and lobbyists and a whole apparatus and structure that is controlled. And it's a symbiotic relationship between big business, big banking, big finance, big agro, big drug, whatever the fuck, big pharma, all of the businesses and shit that run our lives into the ground, essentially, have a revolving door in and out of the government. And that is by design. That's not natural. That's not how it's just falls into place no matter what. over the years and decades of capitalism growing and spreading across the world, we see various technocrats coming in the picture to kind of dictate how society is supposed to be run, how workers are supposed to be created, how citizens are supposed to be educated, most importantly, to benefit moneyed elite. So it's like those are the things that we were diving into. And in chapter 7, specifically, we're going to be talking about how this conflicts with human rights on a grand scale, right? All the good stuff. So if you guys are new here, there's a chance that you are not, you don't know what's going on, you don't know what's happening. This is my book club. Really, it's not like a regular book club, I don't think, because it's simply just me going on live, both on TikTok and YouTube, and reading a book out loud, because I realized yeah. Oh yeah, fam, you missed a month of Saturdays, but don't worry, we said chapter 7 has been a very long chapter, and that's on me. Life has been happening, travel, work, the fall of the empire, all these things have been popping up. So it's been quite difficult for me to maintain the book club. But for those of you who don't know what the book club is, it is essentially just me sitting and reading a book. I did this because I realized one day that I don't read as many books as I want to, and I doom scroll on my social media so much. That's probably what's absorbing a lot of the time that I was able to do this. Hey, what up, Caver? Hey, Matt, welcome. Yeah, welcome. Come through every Saturday between the hours of 3 and 4. We do this, right? So basically, I read to you guys. But I do more than just read a book out loud. I'm processing this information out loud as well. If you are on YouTube, you will have the high quality audio and the video and all the cool stuff. Actually, the YouTube channel is like. So if you want to watch this, or be here, watch me on the big screen and all that good stuff, you can swing by my YouTube channel. Link in, where the links are and shit. If you're on TikTok, this is where it started. It started on TikTok, and I grew a little bit of a community doing this stuff. So with that being said, this is not just me reading out loud. This is me like figuring out words and definitions and all these other concepts. But it's also integrating you guys. Those of you who are in chat on TikTok or in chat on YouTube. I welcome your feedback. We are learning together. It's not just me lecturing. You guys probably know some things that I don't know. Do you have a list of history book recommendations? I do not, D. I don't have a list of history books. However, now that I'm doing this shit in my office like I'm supposed to, a lot of the, especially with this book right here that we're reading, it harkens back to some books that we have covered as a book club previously, a couple of years ago. So, for instance, one of the books, where are you? Like this book right here is constantly being referenced in the book that we're reading right now. We delve into this book early last year. Right? So Capital Order. So if you want, this is a history book. It basically talks about how neoliberalism and austerity were created and how it paved the way to fascism. Very fucking terrifying, because you are going to see a lot of parallel tactics that have been used by our technocrats and our government and big business in this book. This is the genesis of it. So a lot of what we've been diving into is history for the most part. Also, How to Hide an Empire by Daniel Immerwahr. That's another great book on history. And I just... If you're interested in, expanding our understanding and seeing it from the United States birth mother, which is the United Kingdom, I also recommend Uncommon Wealth, Britain in the Aftermath of Empire. This is a great book to dive into. seeing how Britain went about lessening its strangle on the globe. You know, some of that was voluntary, some of that wasn't. But this goes through how that happened and how it shaped the United Kingdom to what it is today. This is a great book to kind of read, especially if you're an American and you want to see what the future holds for our shit. So yeah. Outside of that, ground rules. Here we are. You know, we're on live. Everybody is on TikTok, so this is really just for you guys. Unless you guys are in, you know, you pop over on the chat on YouTube. But this is a sacred space. This is a space where, you know, we share our ideas. We are processing and grappling with and trying to understand the context that we're reading. Oh, shit. Sorry, guys. That was weird. Yeah, so we are learning these things, and we're figuring all this stuff out together as a group, you know? This is not a place to argue, be an asshole, be a troll, all that good stuff. You know what I'm saying? I am tyrannical when it comes to blocking people. I'm tyrannical when it comes to muting people, okay? I like my spaces to be nice and copacetic and keen. Don't rock the boat, okay? You know, please don't. I would appreciate it if you know. You know, everyone is welcome. And in order for everyone to be welcome, we can't have any shit starters on either side. So please be respectful of everybody that is watching. Please be respectful of me. You know, all that good shit. Please be nice. Please, you know, vocalize your thoughts and stuff like that in the chat. We are here to learn together. All that good shit. I have mods. I don't know if my mods are here or on right now. If they are, great. If not, that's fine too. But my mods are equally, if not more, tyrannical with that black button. So just please respect the space. That's all I ask. Other ground rules. Engagement. You guys are hey, Moss, welcome, fam. You guys are more than welcome to join me. You know, if you have any ideas, if there's something that popped up in your head after I read some shit, say it. You know what I'm saying? There are about a dozen of us sharing time together right now. And that means that there's probably over 150 years of thirsting is absolutely still encouraged. Please, by all means, thirst after me if you want, if you like. I welcome it. But yeah, we have over 100 years worth of experience. Just between the dozen or so of us that are sharing time together right now. So if you have anything, any tidbits or anything like that, feel free to share them shits. You know what I'm saying? It makes everything so much more fun. You know, so much more fun. Other things. If you want to catch up on what we've been doing here in the book club, you can go to my YouTube channel, which is Where It Counts. All of the archived lives, especially since I've been doing them on YouTube, are on my YouTube account, right? So if you want to check it out there, you can. If you want to do us a solid and check it out on the Patreon, that's also awesome. The Patreon is free. All of the extra content that I do on the Patreon, which is like a little, you know, side project that I'm doing with reacting to TV shows and shit, all of that is on the Patreon. It's there for free. The only thing about the Patreon is like getting people to go there, check out any updates that are happening with me, with the book club or anything else that I'm doing, as well as if you find it in you to want to donate to the Patreon. We are trying to save up money, and then as a community, we donate that money to an organization, a person, whatever, what have you, that we feel needs help for the month. We have about like 5 members, like paying members in the Patreon. Those are amazing people. It's been really great to have that stuff. So we have about like, I don't know, like $40 in the coffers right now. We got like $40 in the coffers right now. But, you know, that's not nothing. And hopefully once it gets to like $150, we can do some moving and shaking with that. I think that that's a great way for us to just help each other out and help out the communities that we live in. You can't always comment on the Patreon. You know, that's because it depends on what I've set. I've noticed that like I can either set it completely public and then everybody can comment and everybody can talk to, you know, engage with the content on Patreon, or I could do it just for the members, whether they're free or paying, regardless. So I think that's on me. But I've been figuring Patreon out a little bit, just trying to get that shit together. I feel like that's it. That's everything, right? That should be everything. I'm hoping. Yeah. So, what time is it? Let me see. All right, we got about like 3 minutes. Let's start at 3:30. Right. We'll dive back into chapter 7. I still need to get myself some water. All that good shit. Oh, the free subscription also limits access. Okay. Well, I'm gonna look into that and make sure that you guys can like just get to everything. Because really, I don't, unless it's something that I can't change because of just the nature of Patreon. This is not like to make money. This is really like a hobby of mine, to sit here, spend a Saturday with you guys, read, coke and joke, talk some shit, And really the goal is just for me to like continue to read, even if it's a little bit, Even if it's like, a sentence or two, a chapter or two, a section or two. I want to read. I want to continue reading books, even when I don't have time. So this is forcing me to make time. And hopefully this will encourage you guys to make time to read a book, All that good shit. So, yeah, we're going to start in like 2 minutes. We're going to dive into chapter 7. I'm going to go ahead and get me some water and some refreshments and some fucking snacky poos and shit. You know what I'm saying? We always need snacks. Okay, you guys go ahead, do the same. And we'll start it off in like a minute or two. That sound cool with everybody? I don't have nobody in the chat and YouTube, so I don't know. But, we'll see how that goes. Whee! Oh, yeah, if you guys don't know, we got Marcel in the back right here. Sleeping like a handsome prince he is. Right? Who's a handsome prince? You're a handsome prince, Papa. Oh, that was a strong stretch, little boy. All right, let's get some water. Eat. Wee. All right. Man, y'all ready for some reading, kids? And excuse my yeah, that's Marcel, baby boy. You going to sleep? Let me take a nap. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for being so patient and waiting and all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. All right. So, hey. Yes, Daddy. Of course. Let's see. Boop. I'm prepping for my break time. You know a nigga be reading and shit. I gotta take breaks after a while. You know, all that good stuff. Okay. Woo. All right, so we're fully ready. I have an alcoholic beverage right now. I'm doing the basic bitch shit of this. Don't judge me. I don't need that. You know. Bismuth. If you're mean the crystal gem, then that's an amazing compliment. Thank you. Am I bismuth? Oh shit. That would be dope. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yes. Hell yeah. Although, I think Steven Universe is a punk bitch for stopping Bismuth from handling them diamonds and shit. But that's just me. I'm a little sensitive about fucking genocide. You know what I'm saying? So them diamonds would have been handled. You know, I would have fucked up Pink Diamond too. Or, you know. But I digress. Don't let me nerd out. Okay. All right. So, again, if you guys want to hear the decent audio of me reading aloud, feel free to swing through the YouTube channel. You know what I'm saying? That would be helpful. For those of you who don't know, I am Haven. I like to read books, but I don't have time to read books. So I use these lives to force me to read some books. You guys are going to be joining me for that journey. Right now, we're going to be reading Vulture Capitalism by Grace Blakeley. We're on chapter 7, and we're going to be diving into the human right to capital flight. That's the section. This is the last section of chapter 7, and then we'll be done, and we'll be hitting part 3, chapter 8, which I may or may not start with you guys today. Probably will. I probably will. Okay, cool beans. All right, you guys all refreshed? You got everything you need and shit? Hold on. Ugh, that sounded nice. Very nice. I like. Okay. All right, cool beans. Well, then let's get it, you guys. Whew. The right, or the human right to capital flight. Oh, and let me know if you can hear me all right, you know, especially on Tiki-Takis. But if you can be so kind as to like swing over to YouTube and drop a period in the YouTube chat so I know that you can hear me okay on there as well. That would be great too. I'd appreciate it. And then if you want, let me know which one sounds better, because then I'll know which one I need to be focusing on or improving, you know? All right. Anyways, I digress. Here we go. The human right to capital flight. Oh, shit. Is that Amazon? Amazon's outside my house, y'all. It's an electric car. These electric vans have been, like, tripping me out and shit. It really has. Anyways. Apartheid South Africa was a grossly unequal and racist society, within which the population was divided into 4 main groups, each of which comprised a separate nation: white, black, colored, and Indian. Marriage between different races was restricted. The right to vote was limited to whites, and black populations were relocated to townships or locations to enforce their separation from the rest of society. Eventually, the government sought to create several separate homelands, or Bantustans, for black citizens, with the aim of developing a series of separate, ethnically homogeneous nation states. The system of apartheid lasted until 1994, when, after years of resistance and struggle, it was slowly dismantled. That same year, South Africa's first genuinely democratic elections were held, and the African National Congress, or ANC, came to power. Sounds clearer on YouTube, but louder there. Okay, hold on a second. We're gonna fix that. Not to fret, not to fret. How about now? I just don't want to blow anybody's ears off on YouTube because I got a powerful machine behind my shit, you know? Not really, but really. Okay, wonderful. Continuing on. Okay, but the fact that such a visible system of institutionalized racism had continued to exist so long into the 20th century remains a source of confusion to liberals, many of whom continue to see the system as an equally African or as a uniquely African one. That is, one that no civilized person could ever have supported. But the rewriting of history of apartheid South Africa as an atavistic hangover. As an atavistic hangover. Somebody look up that word. Afternoon, what's up? From a bygone era ignores the extensive support the apartheid government enjoyed around the world right up until the moment it fell, which is exactly what will be the case with, Palestine. You have the entire world supporting and maintaining this regime up until the point where it can't. So, a little foreshadowing there for our future. Wilhelm Röpke, one of the founders of the neoliberal movement, whom we met in chapter 6, was the single most high-profile champion for white South Africa. So the single most high-profile champion for white South Africa was one of the founders of the neoliberal movement, which is one of the reasons why... Oh, okay. Atavistic, which kind of means retro. Okay, like throwback. Cool beans. Atavistic is like throwback. Got you. But yeah, so one of the reasons why neoliberalism is really constantly steering towards an anti-black or racist in general purview and lane is because it's rooted in racism. Like, one of the founders was supporting the fuck out of the subjugation of an indigenous group of people so that England or whoever the fuck could rob them from their resources. Like, that's by design, While many in liberal circles know Röpke for his championing of what is now known in Germany as the social market economy, his views on race have been written out of his official biography. Okay, so just know this should be that feels like par for the course. Like the erasing of history is part of the par for the course. So when liberals complain about Donald Trump removing archives and news articles and all of these things that really do help us to understand the past, it's really because that is par for the course. That is what liberals do. They don't do it as ham-fisted, but they still do it, right? And fasciness is a socio-political yearning. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if you want to glorify a mythical past, you can't have anything from that time frame fucking up your myth, fucking up the fantasy. He firmly believed in the inferiority of the black race and supported apartheid. He described the South African Negro, quote unquote, as, quote, a man of an utterly different race who, quote, stems from a completely different type and level of civilization. Röpke also diverged from other liberals in the 1960s when he supported the unilateral Declaration of Independence made by apartheid Rhodesia. Right? So Rapke is about this segregation shit. All right. He is about this shit. Keep these motherfuckers separate and let's still rob them. You know, that's Rapke's shit. But Rapke's views were not motivated by racism alone. He, along with many of his fellow neoliberals, believed that it was imperative to protect the rules governing the economy from unfettered democracy. Okay. Yeah, you have to control the lie. And when the legend becomes fact, you print the legend, right? Many neoliberals believed that black South Africans, who, like many other formerly colonized peoples, had not been socialized into the necessary reverence for liberal rules and norms, couldn't be trusted with the vote. That's what they feel about them. Some neoliberals defended apartheid on the grounds that, as Quinn Solbodian put it, quote, democracy might have to be restricted for certain peoples in order to preserve stability and prosperity. It's a big ass wasp. As we'll see, the attitude towards democracy in South Africa was part of a wider neoliberal project to encase democracy around the world. The specter of decolonization hung heavy in the minds of neoliberals, who saw the attempts at international solidarity of the kind practiced in Bandung as a threat to their project. How could billions of the world's poorest people be enfranchised without upsetting the delicate balance of power between capital and labor? That might be a hint that maybe we shouldn't be doing capitalism, but that's just me. You know, I'm weird. I'm weird at putting two and two together and shit. Maybe we don't do this fucking thing. I don't know. Seeking to limit the scope of state power, the neoliberals actively sought to construct a system of international rules and norms, supervised by the world's most powerful capitalist states, that would prevent the emergence of economic democracy and consolidate the power of rich countries over poor. Okay? So we are seeing the neoliberals looking out into the world and saying, how can we maintain this for the sake of capitalism, right? This system was meant to institutionalize a separation between economics and politics at the level of the world economy. South Africa's Bantustans were the perfect incarnation of this logic. They allowed the apartheid government superficially to accede to demands for self-government, providing some black South African subjects with the appearance of national sovereignty. But the boundaries of this sovereignty would be predetermined by the South African government, and, crucially, the ownership of the most valuable land and natural resources would be jealously guarded by white South Africans, who were seen as the only people disciplined and civilized enough to respect the rule of the market. Enforcing this kind of separation would require a strong state capable of resisting popular pressure, just like the one found in apartheid South Africa. As we saw in the introduction, the neoliberals believed they were fighting a war against nationalistic economic planning. Hayek, yet, while he may often have been discouraged active intervention in the national economy, he had no problem with powerful capitalist states, corporations, or financial institutions bending poor states to their will. One of the most powerful mechanisms through which these inequalities have been enforced is through the international financial system. The laws and norms of international finance are, as we saw in Chapter 5, determined by a constellation of powerful public and private actors and enforced through both domestic and international courts. What's up, Fatal Pros? I haven't seen you in a minute, fam. Welcome. During the 1980s, the neoliberals sought to construct a regulatory architecture at the international level that would institutionalize the, quote, human right to capital flight by ensuring that investors were always able to leave poor countries, taking their cash with them. I think this is like a perfect example of like them setting this up to fuck over, you know, the global south and countries in the global south, and most specifically Africa, right? Like that was the goal. However, you dig yourself into this hole where now there's a boomerang effect that's happening, and they are essentially ditching their own countries. You know, they're ditching the UK, they're ditching Italy, they're ditching Germany, they're ditching the United States to go where this growing market is, because capitalism has no patriotism. You know, it doesn't attach itself to a flag for the most part. It attaches itself to whatever market is growing where there's profit to be had. And now that profit is in a communist country like China. I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, like, I don't know if we're all going to be alive for this. If we end up in World War III, this might not happen. But it would be interesting to see how the rhetoric of the technocrats within capitalism change their feelings about communism. You know, I'm already kind of seeing it in people like pundits, like what's his name, Sagar, from Breaking Points, where, you know, he's hitting that, well, you got to give it to the Chinese, they're able to do all this stuff, you know, kind of shit, you know, and a lot of the things that he's praising are the mechanisms within communism that allow them to move in the way that they're moving with these companies, these state-owned companies, right? Most people love communism as long as you don't call. Yeah, you know. People are slow. But eventually it all catches up, right? So, one of the most powerful mechanisms through which these inequalities have been enforced is through... Oh, yeah, we did that already. Sorry. Starting from the top. The idea was that potentially unruly new nations could be inoculated against economic nationalism through capital mobility. So economic nationalism is basically just these countries taking a piece of the profit from the market and investing in themselves. That's what's nationalistic about it, just to make sure that's clear. Right. So, the idea was that potentially unruly new nations could be inoculated against economic nationalism through capital mobility, which would allow the wealthy and large corporations to move their money out of any country that threatened property rights. The threat of capital flight has been a powerful tool used by core states and multinational corporations against poor countries. Right? God forbid a nation cares for itself. God forbid. To ensure... Chevron, for example, fled Ecuador in the wake of the early court ruling against it, selling all its assets and taking its cash with it. And this tactic has proved particularly easy to use on the very poorest countries in the world, countries like Zambia. When Zambia gained independence in 1964, it was heavily dependent upon copper exports. And at the time, its copper mines were owned by foreign corporations. To ensure the country benefited from its natural resource wealth, the Zambian government nationalized large sections of the industry and imposed taxes on the foreign miners. Now, again, this is something that a nation must do in order for it to grow, in order for it to expand, in order for its market to grow. But if you are a foreign country that relies on this country's market being cheap, you don't want it to be able to take in some of that profit, right? You don't want it to be able to do that, because once it's able to do that, then it can, invest in infrastructure, invest in its people, and start to naturally grow out of being a primary, raw material producer to a tertiary producer, creating tactiles and all that other textiles and all other shit, or growing into the tertiary, which is a service economy and all that, right? So you don't want to do that, because then it doesn't make shit stay cheap for you, the global North nation, or to keep it a buck. It doesn't remain cheap for the United States, the United Kingdom, all of Europe and all that shit, right? Or even China for that matter, which is something that we should also keep in mind. Even though China is the up and comer and it's a little bit more benevolent, they are still using capitalist frameworks and mechanisms to grow themselves, and eventually the nations that they connect with in Africa, that investment is going to cause them to grow. They're going to be investing in their people. It'll be interesting to see how China maneuvers around that when it's their turn to be the economic hegemony, or one of the major powers in the world. To ensure the country benefited from its natural resource wealth, the Zambian government nationalized sections of the industry and imposed taxes on the foreign miners. These taxes ended up capturing the majority of the profits from the exploitation of the country's copper, and these new government revenues were channeled into building infrastructure, expanding public services, and subsidizing basic necessities like food and fuel. The New West, maybe, who knows? Or maybe not the New West, but the rise of the East, But Zambia was in a race against time, and it hadn't been able to develop its domestic industry quickly enough to insulate itself from the commodities crash when it finally came. Copper prices fell sharply over the course of the 1970s and 80s, in part a result of the economic crisis generated by the Vulture shock. And this plunged Zambia into a deep crisis. Employment and output fell and taxes dried up, leading to a debt crisis. External debt rose from $814 million to $3.24 billion. That is a steep fucking rise, yo. And they did this over the course of the 1970s, and then doubled again to $6.9 billion by the end of the 1980s. As the dependency theorists had warned, if a state like Zambia couldn't diversify from a dependence on the export of volatile commodities, then it would lurch from crisis to crisis without ever building up the capital needed for sustainable development. Yeah. I mean, although I'm really interested in him saying that, like China's been here for 5,000 years. Like, sure, yes, in the grand scheme of things, that's very true. But that rhetoric is, like, at the very least, a pink flag for me. Because remember, we got to be very sensitive to people hearkening back on certain types of pasts, right? What did those 5,000 years look like? And what did it look like for the people living on that land? That's what I would be like, okay, well, what does that 5,000 years look like, my guy? What does it look like? But that's just me. Exactly. It is a similar thing that's happening here in the U.S., in cities in the U.S., So, like, you can see how these cycles can reverberate into each other, I like that you've put those two and two together, like the debt cycle that entire nations in the global South experience are debt cycles that people in America experience in their own homes. It's very, very similar tactics that our institutions wage against the poorest of the poor in our countries that they do for the poorest of the poor nations on the planet. The strategy is the same, it just changes in scale, so good eye on that one there. Good eye on that one. Okay, so yeah, that jumped high. That jumped high. In exchange for emergency lending, the government was forced to cut public spending. Right? So they were forced to cut public spending, which is terrible. That cutting public spending, remember, we have to remind ourselves from last week, cutting public spending, public services, all that stuff, that is austerity, right? And as we learned in the Capital Order, I don't know, it was like in the way. But as we learned in the Capital Order, austerity is used as a tool by the capitalists to put the labor force in check. They put us through austerity on purpose a lot of the time. It's designed. Sometimes it's by accident, but for the most part, it is a tool used to keep the working people in check, right? So when they put us through austerity, when they take away our public services, when they do all that shit, that is on purpose, and it's meant to harm us. And just like Tawasi pointed out, a lot of this cycle, as it is for the interpersonal, it can also be for the international, right? So the same way that they use austerity to starve us out is the same way they use austerity to starve out various countries and nations that they're using for cheap exports. So, in exchange for emergency lending, the government was forced to cut public spending, devalue the currency, raise interest rates, and reduce subsidies on necessities. Successive currency devaluations proved particularly regressive, as without much of international demand for copper, they did little to stimulate export earnings. Instead, devaluations increased the price of imports, particularly food. Developmentalism was finally abandoned in the late 1980s, quashing what remained of Zambian industry. At the nadir of global copper prices, under pressure from the international financial institutions, the U.S.-friendly president, Frederick Chiluba, sold off most of the Zambian copper sector on the cheap to international investors. The multinationals that purchased these assets knew they were getting an excellent deal, yet the government still offered the companies generous tax breaks to ensure the negotiations were wrapped up quickly, in line with the wishes of the World Bank and the IMF. By 1996, 223 state-owned companies had been privatized, right? So what comes with austerity is privatization of public works. And that's something that we should always be concerned about and careful about. Like the privatization of public works means that the things that we have decided as a society that all of us should have, all of us should need, is now something that a group of people can make a profit off of. And that's never a good thing. It's never a good thing. Throughout the privatization process, both the Zambian government and the international investors seeking to buy its assets were being advised by large international banks and law firms based in the rich world. The government was also under immense pressure from the international financial institutions from which it was borrowing, then gripped by a relentless drive for privatization. While the World Bank was holding the Zambian privatization process up as a model for the rest of the world, keener observers were criticizing the process for the looting, deindustrialization, deepening debt, and increasing poverty that would emanate from it. The newly privatized and now foreign-owned corporations were and are able to avoid substantial amounts of tax through loopholes and deductions. This tax avoidance, combined with the low tax rates the government had imposed and financial deregulation, meant that profits were sucked out of the country and into the pockets of shareholders in the rich world. Okay? So they sucked out all of this fucking resource. This is the smash and grab, right? This is basically what we've just seen. Okay? You get them saddled up, you get them hopped up, and even the dependency, Zambia's dependency on one export, that is something that is also by design. This is something that we learn in books like The Capital Order, or in books like How to Hide an Empire by Daniel Immenwar, or books like Uncommon Wealth, right? We see how with the IMF, with the World Bank, these financial institutions run into a poor nation, tell them, hey, we will bail you out, or we will help you with infrastructure and give you a loan if you just export this one commodity. And that's usually so that the richer nations can have cheap products, cheap material for them to like make a profit off of, right? This is the okie doke that they do. And then once that country is fully dependent on this one commodity, if anything were to happen, something always fucking happens. Sometimes it's by accident, most of the time it's by design. But if that commodity experiences a tightening or a downturn, then that basically puts that country at complete and total risk. They are already trying to pay off a loan in addition to running a country, right? And then when that commodity, the only commodity that they're dependent on, once that dries up or goes away, then the country's fully in debt. Then they go back to the very same fucking financial institutions that told them to not diversify in the first fucking place. And then those institutions are like, oh, I guess we'll bail you out since you don't know how to do, capitalism, right? And they put even more loans on them that have even higher interest rates on them. And with this, instead of them just dictating what they can sell, what the country can sell, they add on what the country needs to get rid of as far as services it provides to its citizens. So that's how you get a bunch of international corporations coming in and running things like electricity, schooling, hospitals, sanitation. A lot of the things that a government should be doing for its people. This is us putting our taxes in a pile so that we can all take care of each other. But instead of us doing that, we put our tax money into the coffers of an international foreign corporation so that they can do it. This is how you end up with a Puerto Rico that has to deal with rolling blackouts continuously the entire country after their electrical grid has been privatized. That's how that happens. This is the smash and grab that they do. While the World Bank was holding the Zambian privatization process up as a model for the rest of the world, keener observers were criticizing the process for the looting, deindustrialization, deepening debt, and increasing poverty that would emanate from it. The newly privatized and now foreign-owned corporations were and are able to avoid substantial amount of tax through the loopholes and deductions. This tax avoidance, combined with the low tax rates the government had imposed and financial deregulation, meant that profits were sucked out of the country and into the pockets of shareholders in the rich world. What's more, and as has been the case with the IMF and the World Bank, driven privatization programs all over the world, the domestic elites walked away from the process with substantial kickbacks, generating visible inequalities that remain a source of resentment in Zambia to this day. Privatization meant that most Zambians did not benefit from the rebound in copper prices seen after the 1990s. Per capita GDP fell from $1,455 in 1976 to $1,037 by 1987. And the trade deficit continued to increase throughout the 1990s. The percentage of the population that is undernourished increased by 5 percentage points to 50% between 1990 and 2001. Over the same period, the country fell 33 places in the UN's Human Development Rankings. Yet, the pressure for privatization and austerity from the international financial institutions had not abated, with the IMF demanding that the government follow through with the pledge to privatize the state-owned electricity company and the public bank under the threat of losing $1 billion in development aid. Thanks to the decimation of the rest of the economy over the course of the 1980s and 90s, by the time the 2008 financial crisis hit, copper accounted for 80% of Zambia's export. While the Zambian economy had very little exposure to the banks that caused the crisis, this didn't stop it from being knocked back. The crash in commodities prices that followed. The country suffered from higher unemployment and inflation, lower government revenues, and a loss of foreign exchange. As money flowed out of the country, the Zambian government once again found itself unable to service its liabilities to international creditors. It was at this point that international capital began to turn the screws on Zambia. Right? So they have, hey, Trini in the building. What's up, fam? Welcome. Happy Saturday. Happy Saturday. Happy Saturday. And welcome. For those of you, Trini is one of the true blues and shit. Motherfucker has been A1 since day one type stuff. So hell yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yes. Okay, so. Oh, the outside has been taking over your life, fam. You know, at least that's what it is. You're touching grass for all of us. So, diving back into this, and how they basically fucked over these people. They fucked over the Zambian nation. I hope you guys are seeing parallels. Do you guys see any parallels from what we are learning about Zambia and what they've gone through? You know, and the fact that, like, by the time the 2008 crash happened, 80% of their exports were copper. And they didn't even get the majority of the profits from that exports. I think we can see a lot, you know, and I think we can also see what's to come for the United States. Because, you know, Elon Musk and Donald Trump are working their damnedest to private. Hey, welcome back, Alex. They're working their damnedest to privatize a lot of government functions, public works, you know. The United States is about to get the global South treatment. They're about to be treated like a Monroe country, you know. So, yikes. Okay. Continuing on. First, the pressure came from the mining companies. As the government entered negotiations with its creditors, the foreign-owned mining sector stepped up an intense lobbying effort to cut its tax liabilities. The government caved and cut taxes on the sector, as well as giving in to numerous demands for greater allowances. Hey, what's up, Mystic? Welcome. Even more than what these motherfuckers have already gotten, despite the fact that they are digging this goddamn country in the ground. And like, low key, if we were to really pay attention to this cycle, this is exactly what private equity firms do to corporations inside of the United States. I see a lot of parallels between what Zambia has had to deal with and what Toys R Us has had to deal with. You see what I'm saying? I don't know if you guys see that shit, but I see it. It is sad that you have to go, but thank you for spending a little bit of your Saturday with us. You know, we'll be here next Saturday. I think. Probably not. Actually, no. We will not be here next Saturday. Next Saturday will be a hiatus, but the Saturday after next, we will be here. Real shit. Real shit. So yeah, join in. Yeah, Joanne Fabric is another one. that I see a lot of parallels as far as the tactics of saddling up an entity with a shit ton of debt, cut corners, cut everything on how it's run. And then when it's dead, you pick the marrow out of the bones because it's cheap. I think that's exactly what we're seeing here. So yeah, these assholes were trying to get even more allowances, which will make it even easier for the mining companies to avoid what little tax they still owe. These motherfuckers are still trying to not pay taxes, right? I really do think that for a lot of corporations, their goal is to get the government to pay them to exist. They're fucking vultures. Aha, I got it. There we go. Then the vultures swooped in. In 2007, just as Zambia was concluding an international negotiation to write down a portion of its debt, Don Nagel International, a vulture fund located in the British Virgin Islands, bought $3.3 million of outstanding debt, sure that Zambia would be unable to repay. The company then sued Zambia for $55 million for reneging on the loan, winning $15.5 million in compensation. All right, so they just tripled. They tripled. They bought $3.3 million for debt, tripled that, and they flipped that into a $15.5 million settlement. This is the okie doke that these vulture firms, these vulture capitalists are doing. As one Zambian official pointed out, paying compensation to Donegal meant that, quote, the treatment, the Medicare, the medicines that would have been available to in excess of 100,000 people in the country will not be available, right? So that's what's being sacrificed when these companies do this to these nations. By 2019, many Zambians were actually worse off than they had been in the 1980s. States like Zambia have been continuously promised that if they only follow the prescriptions of the World Bank and the IMF, they will catch up with the global north. That's the lie. That's the lie. If only you just keep doing what the IMF and the World Bank tells you, and then you should be fine. You'll be just like America in no time. In no time. Ignoring the fact that the reason why America is because it was able to maneuver itself into these spaces and maneuver itself financially into finding countries that it could outsource its, lack of natural resources, keeping those motherfuckers down and cheap as much as possible so that they can create higher end products, right? Exactly. It's stolen wealth, and it's stolen wealth at every single level in the process of getting an item from the ground to your room in your house. At every single level, they are fucking these people over and taking more than what they should at every single level. All right. And it's done by design. It's on purpose. Okay. So I want us to always keep that in mind. It's done on purpose. Opening up one's economy is supposed to lead to financial inflows that support development, as mainstream economic models assume that this investment flows from rich countries to poor ones. This is just trickle-down economics on an international scale. Okay, that's all that is. It's trickle-down economics on an international scale. Yet, since the 1980s, when capital mobility was institutionalized, the volume of investment flowing out of the global south has exceeded the flowing into it. In part, this is because Western financial institutions have helped elites in the global south siphon money out of their home nations to avoid tax and expropriation. Putin's henchmen, for example, kept a lot of their money in London property, confident that no British government would dare touch it. Another factor is the artificial inflation of returns in the rich world. investors have little incentive to park their cash in long-term infrastructure projects in Zambia when they can get double the return by buying a property or financial assets in London. Assets that can be sold at any time. In fact, neoliberal theorists like Ropke never much cared if poor countries, quote unquote, caught up with the rich ones. Okay, they didn't give a shit if they caught up with the rich ones. That's how you know that shit's a lie. Ropke saw it as necessary that the global south be kept in a position of underdevelopment in order to prevent over-industrialization and agriculturalization of the world. So in Ropke's mind, one of the founders of neoliberalism, it is imperative that the poorer countries, and this is no mistake, these are countries that were once colonial subjects to these empires, they needed to stay at the bottom in order for the rest of the global north to even function or exist, right? That's one of the founders saying that. Capital mobility was central to this project. If international investors could not threaten to pack up and leave at the slightest hint of developmentalist economic policy, then how could rogue states be disciplined into adopting neoliberalism, right? Everything is strong arming all these different nations into neoliberalism, right? Strong arming people into globalization, into capitalism. Capitalism, this should show us that this is not natural, all right? Capitalism is not just how things are. This is, again, by design. There are thinkers like Ropke who come up and try to force this reality onto everyone. This is why, like, Hypervigilance, who's on here and on Instagram, constantly says that fascism is like just, governmental narcissism, right? Because narcissism is just tyranny of perspective, tyranny of reality. And with fascism, the reality needs to be that this capitalistic system works. The people at the bottom are supposed to be at the bottom because they are inherently lesser than, right? And if you are at the bottom or you find yourself on a lower ring of the totem pole, that is by grand design, divine design, right? That is what fascism is. It's just the end logic of capitalism, right? Right. It's the foregone conclusion of capitalism, and this is how we see this, because even, Ropke is not a fascist. Ropke is just a neoliberal. And even in the founder's mind, no matter what, a very specific group of people on the planet need to be at the bottom in order for this system to work. That is bare bone minimum what the founder of neoliberalism is saying. Somebody has to be at the bottom. It's going to be the former colonies that our empires once controlled, and we will figure out all these different ways to make sure that they keep the resources cheap and stealable. So we might not be able to do it like how our grandpappy did it with imperialism and colonialism, but we can do this with capitalism. We can figure out how to siphon these resources. That's all that this is figuring out how to siphon resources from one place so that you can benefit from it in another. That's all that is. All right, continuing on. I'm going to finish this paragraph, and then I'm going to take a break because I need to go to the bathroom. All right, so Ropke's arguments perfectly summarize the critique of neocolonialism leveled by thinkers like Kwame Nkrumah. I always fuck that name up. Who believed that the global north actively sought to keep the global south in a position of permanent underdevelopment. Which, by the way, damn, I don't even know where that book is. Man. The Decivilization of Africa. That is a book. I will try to find it. I think I have it. Great book, but it really dives into this. And this really does, a lot of this proves Afro-pessimism to be right. You know, if you guys have not dove into Afro-pessimism, highly recommend that you dive into that philosophy. But this kind of just like proves the motherfuckers right. I'm just throwing that out there. As we've seen, the the institutionalization of capital mobility was, from the start, part of a strategy designed to keep states in the global south from realizing true political and economic independence. By enforcing a, quote, human right to capital flight, the neoliberals ensured that international investors would punish any country that failed to abide by their policy agenda. We also see them doing this tactic in between states, right? You know, a perfect example of this is the NFL. If a city doesn't do what the NFL wants it to do, if the city doesn't, you know, give the tax breaks that the NFL wants it to have, then the NFL magically finds a reason to move a team. And then all of that quote unquote revenue that is brought to the city, despite the fact the connection of culture, how deep and rich the culture is, like the Oakland Raiders, you know, despite all of that shit, they will leave and take the team with them. Damn all of the history that comes behind that fucking team to begin with. This is exactly I'm taking my ball and taking it someplace else. They do it the same thing that they're doing internationally, they're doing interstate, right? And they're doing it interpersonally. I want you guys to always constantly see how the tactic, the size and scale might be different, but the tactic is very much similar. Oh wait, shit. By enforcing a human right to capital flight, the neoliberals ensured that international investors would punish any country that failed to abide by their policy agenda. This kind of neoliberal planning, because it is couched in the language of law and norms, is rendered invisible to most observers. The policies advocated by neoliberals are presented as mechanisms to protect the free market from the overbearing power of the state, even as, in private, neoliberal thinkers have described the need for strong, often highly authoritarian governments to promote the interests of capital. Hence how we get to fascism. All right, so I'm going to take a pause right here because I got a pee-pee. If you guys want to also fucking take your little breaky poo, by all means, do that. Give me like 5 minutes. We'll hop back into this at 4:30. Okay, cool beans. Hey. Oh no. Oh no. The table. That was enough time. I could have made me a fucking. What do you call it? Could have made me a grilled sandwich. All right. Hey. Okie dokie, you guys. I'm back. I'm back. Back with a New York groove. All right, cool beans. Whew. Crazy shit. I know that we've been like really, I've been like doubling down on like just paying attention to the parallels, the cycles, the things that we see. It's important to understand this, you know, because like I don't want us to learn what's happening on an international scale and not be able to grasp just like it seems overly simplistic, but it's not. It's really complicated to put the screws and put the same okey doke on every single level, you know. But when you can control, and this is something that we learned in the capital order, you know, after like we learn why they did this, right? In the capital order, we learn why they decided to structure the world the way that they did. You know, after the interwar period between World War I and World War II, workers were gaining rights. You know, a lot of people were getting money from work, you know, going into World War I as soldiers, and they came back and had a little bit more resource, you know, which a lot like a country like Zambia. When Zambia gets money where they can invest in themselves, they grow the infrastructure, just like anybody would grow the infrastructure of their household, right? But because of that, it got a lot of people thinking, hey, maybe we should have a set amount of hours that we're allowed to work and a set amount of money that we're supposed to have and a minimum amount of money that we're supposed to get for our labor. Maybe we should get educated. Maybe we should have a pension. Maybe we should have this. Maybe we should have that. Like having that time created the first wave of labor movements, right? That's why you see a mass cracking down in that interwar period, especially in the United States, in the UK and Italy, so on and so forth. You know, that was a response to the growth of industrialization, right? So neoliberalism comes out of that, sees it, and it's like, okay, well, we can't allow the workers to teach themselves. We can't allow the workers to do all this shit. How the fuck are they learning this? So they find it prudent to pull things out of the root. So trying to control education and how the state educates the citizenry so that when the citizenry goes into the labor force, they don't have the knowledge needed to coalesce and build a movement so that their rights are protected. You know what I'm saying? Like neoliberalism creates all of this, you know, they do it both in the interpersonal, they do it in the interstate, and they do it in the international. You know what I'm saying? Like it's the same okie doke over and over and over again, but it works because they indoctrinate us. And one of the best things that we could ever do for ourselves as a citizenry is to deprogram ourselves away from that indoctrination. You know, like no matter what you think, you are not supposed to benefit from capitalism. You're not. And as we take this turn and we get to this late stage shit, we're going to see less